Shalom, this is Yehoshaphat Oliver coming to you on the 5th of June 2020, Yud Gimel Sivan. The government is out to provoke conflict among the citizens through acts of mass deception. That is the agenda. That is the agenda of COVID. COVID is not just about fear of an invisible enemy, a disease. In other words, man against nature, which is one form of spreading fear. Another part of COVID, I would say a more important part of the COVID false narrative, is the agenda to create conflict. The government knows that there are people who will be skeptical of COVID, such as myself, and many others who will object, and that has created two camps, two polarized groups of COVID supporters, zealous government lackeys, yes men and yes women to the government. Yes, whatever you say, oh great government Lord, our Lord and Savior, we will obey. You say to stay home, save lives. Sure, save lives. If you said it saves lives, so it must be true, and we wouldn't want to endanger lives. We wouldn't want to endanger our own lives, never mind someone else's lives. That would be really wrong. So yes, we're going to obey because the government knows best. And then there are other people who think critically, who ask questions, who want to see the statistics, who want to see the models, who want to know who are the people telling us this, what is their background, what is their record, are they unbiased, do they have an agenda, do they have an ideology, are we being played? Is the danger being exaggerated? Is it being made up out of whole cloth? These are questions that critical thinkers would ask. These are questions that students of history would ask. People who learned history with the mind to apply it in modern times in different situations. To think critically of which lessons from history can be applied, should be applied, which ones are less relevant, but certainly not to view history as simply rote memorization so that you can show off your knowledge at a cocktail party. No, the purpose of that knowledge is to translate it into your life when it is necessary, to use it in assessing how to respond to the events before you. And it's very practical. Although, the politicians aren't consulting with you and me, but we have choices to make based on our interpretation of the narrative, the story, the events that is being presented to us. So, therefore, it behooves us to look deeper. Government exists in theory to serve the people, but in practice, as the Talmud says in Pirkei Avos, the government only cares about itself. It is ultimately the ultimate in selfishness. They appear to be loving, to care about you at the time of their benefit, but they do not stand for a person in the time of his need. Right? They make a big show. That's a quote from the Talmud. They make a big show of wanting what's best for the people, having their best interest at heart. I know it'll be hard, but we all need to get together to to flatten the curve. We're all in this together, and join with your fellow citizens in this mass effort to overcome this invisible enemy. It'll just be 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into 2 months. And what it's really about is mass mind control. Programming the people into submission to the government through sophisticated deception, using crisis actors, using fake statistics, using fake models, taking advantage of the people's trust in authority, in government authority, and in academic authority in order to manipulate them. And so too in rabbinic authority, because the rabbis fell for this story. In most cases that I can observe, it's very disappointing to me, but that's the reality. As far as I'm concerned, nothing personal. But the vast majority of rabbis have bought the fake narrative. They simply believe that if someone says that they're a medical expert, that must be legit. And certainly if you have several medical experts, that must be legit. Well, no. All those quote-unquote medical experts are trained to follow the party line, to toe the party line, to conform with what is expected of them, or else they risk their licenses. Yes, there are some, I'm not saying all doctors and professionals are like that, but the idea that simply because someone who's went to college and has a position tells you something, that therefore you can take it at face value and trust it and base your life on it, base your decisions on it, in your personal life, in your communal life, and your religious life, that is incredibly naive. And it's just very unfortunate to observe people who are so naive, so easily misled, and of course, it has nothing to do with secular education. If anything, I mean, I'm not seeing much difference between those who have a secular education and those who don't have a secular education. If anything, perhaps a secular education makes it more likely that you'll fall for the propaganda, because by going to a secular college, you are sort of signing into the system that rewards you for, paying the tuition, and then you're given their stamp of approval. So you have a great emotional investment in the whole college system. So therefore you're much more likely to take the word of a college educated professional and academic at face value because of your belonging to that system yourself. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, someone who didn't get a college education, part of him may feel, view college, certainly when they're studying supposedly hard sciences or things that promote themselves as science, as being very authoritative. It's held up. And yes, many religious people and rabbis view very highly and in high regard the words of professionals and do not suspect them of foul play, of deception, of being afraid for their own livelihoods, of having a vested interest in the positions that they espouse. The only medical opinion that's legitimate is one that it comes from an unbiased place. So the first thing to assess is whether that person um, is telling you his unbiased opinion. Not whether they have a very prestigious position, because they could have that position but be merely puppets being used by some higher up. Don't fall for the external trappings of a person's position. Yes, that does mean they're not doing a lot of good, but it does mean that when push comes to shove, they will tell you what they're told to tell you and not what they really think. Or maybe they'll process it because of their bias. They'll process the event in a way that fits with the official story because they have this resistance to rocking the boat, to coming out against the official story because they're afraid for their livelihood. And the same goes for, unfortunately, for the rabbis, especially those who do not have a record of speaking out against injustice. They have the same conflict of interest. And when I say speaking out against injustice, I don't mean injustice that it's politically correct to speak out against, When everyone else is saying it, you also jump on the bandwagon. No, I'm talking about being ready to say unpopular things in the right time and place that need to be said. So if this rabbi is not that type, or if this doctor, if anyone with any authority is not that type of person, well, don't expect him to suddenly become that type of person now. Expect them to conform with the official, accepted majority narrative, just as they did until now. You can't hold these people up as reliable sources of information because they are not equipped with the ability to dissent from the dominant narrative. So what we're witnessing is mass mind control through trauma. When someone is pushed into a state of fear, of trauma, of emotional pain and distress, mental, psychological, inner pain, then whatever you tell them is seared onto their subconscious, onto their inner self. It is absorbed deeply. It is etched into their being. They irrationally accept what you tell them. And all the more so because they don't realize that that's what's happening, because it's done through deceptive means. When the punishment, when there's an official punishment being given, right, it's supposed to give you a message, like being put in prison or what have you. Well, on a conscious level that the pain is meant to deter you from future disobedience. That's not as effective in reprogramming a person's behavior. I mean, I don't know how effective it is, but far more effective, in my understanding, is pain that is inflicted on the person without his even being aware, and that then being associated with a certain message, a certain directive. Do this, don't do that. For example, in the case of COVID, stay home. Stay home, save lives. Obey the government. Because death. This person died and that person died, and old people might die, and many old people died, and Italy, and Spain, and China, and New York. And there were so many deaths here and there, and even young people, and even kids, and on and on. Death, disease, death. Someone I know, someone my friend knows, somebody in my community. That inflicts trauma. And when you're in that state of fear, of trauma, of disorientation, you are far more susceptible to accept whatever you're told by the powers that be. You view them now, you've sort of regressed to a childhood state, to a state in which you're not operating using your intellect that you've developed, hopefully, but rather you're in this needy, dependent state where you view everything with low resolution. You are desperate, and you need the government to come in, to step in, to help you out, to show you the way. And this becomes this like pecking order, right? The rabbis or the lay leaders, they don't know what to do. They become desperate, so they don't think rationally, to the extent that they ever did think critically, and they automatically accept what the government tells them uncritically. If you try to ask them, well, why do you automatically trust the information we're getting from the government? I mean, does the government have a record of honesty, of integrity, of good faith? So why are you telling me that I should accept these edicts of yours because they're based on information you receive from the government or directives you receive from the government? Why is that viewed by you as a reliable source of information? And the answer to that will be something like go jump in the lake. Because they know there is no answer for that. And they know that the government is very unreliable, and they don't want to admit that, because then that would put them in a very uncomfortable position. So they therefore obey and adopt the edicts of the government, and then the people in turn, who are desperate, who are traumatized, they turn to the rabbis, or they turn to the lay leaders, they turn to the media, and they just automatically accept whatever they're told by those powers that be, the politicians. They just accept it. But those people in turn are following a script that they receive from higher up, and so on. And everyone is being programmed into submission, into obedience. And we need to undermine, we need to fight back against this whole fear-mongering atmosphere, and this whole groupthink that's developed. We must obey authority because our survival depends upon obedience to authority, because we're not going to go there to consider the prospect of disobeying authority. That's too intimidating. We'd rather look away from the warning signs of the directives we're receiving and information we're receiving being corrupt and self-serving. We'd rather ignore that and simply obey. That's not a place we want to go. We need to fight back against this groupthink, against this mass mind control. We need to not allow ourselves to be emotionally affected by the events we observe. At least we need to try to pull back, as the expression is in Chabad philosophy, that the mind should control the heart. We need to control and the fear. When you know that the agenda is to make you afraid, you know that with your mind, then with your heart, you will be able to stay calm. If you think that these are just organic events that are happening, if you think that these officials are telling you their honest opinion, you will be far more likely to just conform, because the authority figure said so. The lay leader said so, the rabbi said so, the academic said so, the politician said so. Who are we? What do we know? We don't know what's really in those politicians, and those they have inside information. The doctors, they went to college. I mean, they are able to figure out what's going on. And there's academics, epidemiologists, even the doctors, for sure. Doctors, as long as you're a doctor, you're already an expert on epidemiology. Why? Because you went to college. It already qualifies you in this climate. We saw these ridiculous statements with. I saw one from Melbourne, where I'm from, with rabbis listed next to MDs, expressing their authoritative opinion that, there should be complete lockdown, no one should go over to anyone's houses, and all these restrictions. They're MDs. What gives them authority? I guess because they're MDs. So an MD is similar to a epidemiologist, I guess. It has some remote connection, and therefore, because they said so, we have to obey their doctors. And the rabbi said so, and we have to listen to them because they spoke to doctors. So therefore, they know what's going on. Even though I can also speak to doctors, I can also research the matter, but because the rabbi spoke to the doctor or the lay leader spoke to the doctor, well, they're better able to assess the matter than you and me, because I guess we're not so smart. And we also don't have so much inside information that they have that they won't share with us in their edicts. They'll just say this is their opinion. And therefore, we should rely on them. They're the leaders and the authority figures, and they know best what we should do. So, don't fall for this narrative. Don't fall for the fear. Don't fall for the propaganda. Same thing is with the riots. The riots are designed to instill fear within the Jewish, within all communities, within the black community, within all communities. If there are race riots, well, everyone is involved. Everyone is open to being attacked. And there have been anti-Semitic attacks on synagogues. It's not about anti-Semitism, in my opinion. What it's really about is creating fear so that Jews view non-Jews as a threat, and they will therefore be more likely to cooperate with government edicts. This is all the handiwork of agent provocateurs. It's an inside job. It's a sophisticated mind control operation, a psychological operation, psyop, and I guess we do need to beef up security, but not because of some guy acting on his own or some secret group of white supremacists. No, It's because the government and the deep state and whatever nefarious actors who want power, they know that that narrative is out there in the collective consciousness, and therefore they can tap into that. They can play that act, and people will buy that story, and therefore it'll be believable, and therefore it can be used to for the sake of expanding their control and their power. So, I mean, yes, it's anti-Semitic, but it's not because they're anti-Semitic. And the same thing is, of course, with the killing, the alleged murder of this black guy. It's nothing to do with, it's not about racism. It's about using the narrative of racism that is out there in the collective mind to create conflict and fear in order that the government can come in and create order out of chaos. This is the prescription of these psychopaths. Problem, reaction, solution. They create chaos. That chaos evokes fear or hatred or some outrage, intense emotion, and then they come in with their solution, which is the expanded authoritarian power. Don't fall for the lies. When tyranny becomes law, resistance becomes a duty. God bless. Thanks for listening. We should see a turnaround. We should see a miracle. God can do anything, and don't be silent.